That could be a clip of learn.
Warhammer studio, and that someone there just told her it was like pornography. That's it. And beyond that, it just feels so hollow because you talk about Mass Effect, a game that feels like it really doesn't necessarily earn the mature rating it gets. The entire controversy about sex in the first Mass Effect game like feels quaint these days, but believe me, it was really stupid back in 2008 too. And number six, when PETA claimed that Nintendo promotes skinning animals. Back in 2011, PETA, which is an organization that ostensibly, because of its initials, which stand for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, was and maybe still is in this fake outrage to generate engagement phase. And this was maybe the fakest outrage of all. Their claim was, and this is a stretch, so try to follow me here, that Super Mario 3D Land is insensitive about or somehow supports the hunting and killing of real-life tanukis for their fur. Basically, they're accusing Nintendo of promoting the skinning of animals because Mario wears a tanuki costume in the game. And if you don't know what a tanuki is, it is a real thing. They're these Japanese raccoon dogs, and the weird statue transformation power it has in Mario games is a reference to the Bake Tanuki, a supernatural creature that looks like a tanuki and can shapeshift into a statue, among other things. PETA went so far as to make an entire game themselves called Mario Kills Tanuki, which is appropriately bloody for maximum outrage. While Shockwave Flash was a big thing on the internet, PETA was really unbearable. They wanted gamers to get angry at them because they wanted to bring light to a real world issue. But as with a lot of these promotional stunts pulled by PETA, it just made the organization seem like attention seekers who intentionally act in bad faith rather than passionate advocates for animal rights. I mean, seriously, this whole thing is because Mario wears an animal costume. That is it.
When there's a big war going on somewhere in the universe, that always reflects on the markets, which makes people like me happy.
And number five, the accusation that the Warhammer 40k Space Marine is a Gears of War ripoff. To start, Warhammer 40k is bigger than ever these days. Steam gets basically a deluge of new 40k games on a monthly basis, and a lot of them aren't that great, but there's just so many of them that there's bound to be a few diehards. With the supply of a Space Marine coming soon, it's fun to go back and consider that this is that Warhammer 40k is a Gears of War. Released back in 2001, Space Marine was the third shooter developed by Relic, where you take on the role of, well, a Space Marine, a genetically modified super soldier who is the Empire's first defense against the many enemies that are constantly besieging them. It almost feels silly describing what a Space Marine is, since they're so ubiquitous nowadays, but back when this game first came out, the Warhammer 40k universe could still be seen as somewhat niche. That's the time this article was written, titled, "How Many Ways Can THQ Space Marine Rip Off Gears of War?" Now, the writer complains about things like the Marines' giant shoulder pads, their oversized guns, the presence of a chainsword, and the copious amounts of violence in Space Marine, claiming they're all stolen from Gears of War. But here's the thing. The first edition rulebook for the Warhammer 40k setting came out all the way back in 1987, while the first Gears of War game came out in 2006, almost 20 years later. Hell, Gears of War wasn't even the only thing a Warhammer game was accused of ripping off. Back when StarCraft was really popular, many accused the dawn of war games as being StarCraft rip-offs without realizing that StarCraft was working from the template that Warhammer created. In comparison to many other points on this list, this accusation is relatively tame, but the fact that it's so long and so easy to verify makes it one of the dumbest allegations out there. And yet, the writer of the article did update it later to say that it was gameplay they were using to rip off Gears of War, but having played both games, I'm gonna say that's not very accurate either. And number four, that animal did say that it was gameplay they were using to rip off Gears of War, but having played both games, I'm gonna say that's not very accurate either. And number four, that Animal Crossing player Former is a predator. This is a pretty bizarre one. It's understandable for parents to be worried about any game their kid plays that supports toddlers. Yes, any game that's popular with kids can potentially be a place where people really shouldn't be interacting with children to crime, but in this case, I think these allegations went a little too far. For this one, we're talking about a specific allegation made by ABC 17. someone noted earlier, closer when the game was first revealed, and one that came out near the release date, and someone noticed with horror that the new screenshot had fewer puddles in it. Clearly, this was a sign that Insomniac had downgraded the game. A common complaint where developers make a game look better before the release as a way to misrepresent how good the game actually looks. And like we said, it's a real problem in games. Downgrading is a thing that does happen. But in this particular case, the whole argument was based on a puddle. Some people thought that the detail on Spider-Man's suit wasn't quite as good as well, so it wasn't all about the puddles, but it might as well have all just been about the puddles. We as gamers make a habit of assuming the worst, especially when it comes to big budget games, but sometimes people really want to see smoke where there's no fire. It makes sense, but it can lead to some really dumb allegations like this one. The amount of puddles aren't going to make or break the game. All just likely done simply for aesthetic reasons. So the reason this one got as big as it did is because the reason it was pretty cool to begin with, and just because people making fun of it as their work was serious. At the end of the day, Spider-Man was a great looking game, and yeah, even if it did get downgraded in games like most games, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, while a lot of the puddle game uproar is probably ironic, it's still pretty dumb. And number two is this idea that Nintendo is dying or going multi-platform. Like, remember back in the dark days of the Wii U, every so often you hear rumors about Nintendo giving up on its hardware development or going multi-platform, or the company just straight up going under. Like, so many people posted pieces and articles about Nintendo's fate prospects. For a while, it really seemed like the possibility that Nintendo, as we knew it, wouldn't be around in a few years. Of course, with the massive success of the Switch, all those allegations have been written off for silly now. We know that Nintendo has weathered some not so great consoles in the past. I mean, remember the Virtual Boy? And that never ended up killing them. But for some reason, there's a particular doom and gloom surrounding the company back in the Wii U day. Part of it probably came from how much the game industry in general was changing at the time. For a lot of people, Nintendo seemed out of touch and old-fashioned compared to the innovations coming from Sony and Microsoft. Of course, these days, it seems like Nintendo's old-fashioned games are more popular than ever, so there's still a big market out there for what they offer. So for this one, we're not really talking about any specific articles or anything, but there were plenty out there. From the outside looking in, this one allegation that probably made sense at the time, but also if you knew anything about Nintendo's financials, absolute load of money and could operate at a loss for an incredibly long period of time, and they don't. With the Nintendo Switch looking poised to surpass the lifetime sales of even the massively popular Wii, it's just hard to see Nintendo as anything less. doesn't get a lot dumber than this. Between December 7th, 1993 and March 5th, 1994, the United States Senate held several congressional hearings about the effects of video game violence on children. These hearings had a huge lasting effect on the video game industry in the US, leading to the creation of the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, or the ESRB, which is still around today. That's, of course, not dumb at all. It's important history if you want to understand how far the video game industry has come. But seriously, the fact that the video game Night Trap was the cause of much of the controversy just looks straight up dumb these days. There were 3 games that got the lion's share of attention during these hearings: Mortal Kombat, Lethal Enforcers, and Night Trap. And Night Trap is by far the dumbest. It's an FMV full-motion video game where the goal is to watch computer screens and stop these goofy-looking monsters from attacking girls at a slumber party. Like, the whole thing looked and felt like a slightly interactive Saved by the Bell Halloween episode, but during the hearing it was accused of promoting gratuitous violence and sexual aggression against women. Keep in mind, this is a game where the goal is to save everyone, and it's almost completely violence-free. To say that the allegations against this game were